Today's a big one for me because January 2025 marks 8 years for me out of the classroom. So I dug deep and I want to share 8 lessons that I've learnt over the years. These are hard learnt lessons. They are truths that I just keep coming back to, and some insights that might just save you time, stress, and sanity. So get comfortable and let's dive in. Welcome to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host, Samantha, and I'm so pleased you're here. As an education business owner myself and a former teacher, I understand the nuances that only apply to us. So in this podcast, I share fluff-free, tailored and actionable ideas that you can mould to suit your needs. If you'd like to take this conversation further, please do reach out. I would love to meet you. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. That way, you'll be helping me help more people. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy. Right, I'm not going to waste any time and I'm going to kick off with number 1. And that is that comparison isn't worth it, but studying it is. Comparison is one of the biggest time drains and energy suckers as well. Regardless of how it manifests, you might be scrolling through social media and seeing someone else's success. And it's not that you're not necessarily happy for them, but you may feel like you're falling behind. But here's the truth. Comparison, it doesn't give you anything, but studying does. So what I mean by that is instead of wondering how are they doing that, or, I wish I could do that, you can reframe that and ask, what can I learn from what they're doing? Essentially, you're shifting your focus from competition to curiosity. Now, I know this sounds like I'm being really ideal, but it really is doable. You can shift your mindset, even though it might be difficult, even though it might feel very natural to compare. I've, over the years, really trained my brain to catch myself out when I'm tempted to compare myself to someone else in a way that just isn't healthy or useful for me. A principal, actually, a friend recently told me she's just qualified as a counsellor, and her mentor said to her that think of feelings as information. And that has really, really stuck with me. So let's say I have a moment where I'm feeling like I'm comparing myself with someone else. I try and identify the emotion, the feeling that I'm feeling. And then I ask myself, what could that be telling me? So let's say I feel envy. Well, that tells me that I'm actually admiring them and I want to achieve what they're achieving. Let's say I feel like I'm not good enough. Well, that tells me that right now I'm feeling insecure, so I need to work out whether that's justified. For example, am I actually comparing myself with someone else where there's a like-for-like situation? Do I actually want to do what it would take to achieve what that person might be achieving? So you get the picture. Reframing your language can really help reframe your thoughts. When you actually swap comparison for learning, you end up discovering practical ideas. I certainly learnt from other people how to show up online in a way that suited me. I saw lots of different ideas, I thought about what resonated, and I kind of immersed myself in that until I found my own voice and my own style. So if you're going into comparison mode, then stop scrolling and start studying. My second lesson learnt is the value in hyper-focusing. I'd say it's something that I really fine-tuned maybe last year. It's something that I've been slowly doing. I understand the importance of focusing on one thing at a time. But the concept of actually hyper-focusing is something I stumbled across just by doing it. I'm labeling it as hyper-focusing. I just discovered it this year and I recently shared it in the mastermind and I want to share it with you today. If you've been listening for a while, then you'll know that I love simplicity. I do think things need to be streamlined and simplified, not just for us, but for our customers, for the fact that it makes things easier to sell, it makes running a business much easier. Just from all angles, I like simplicity. And part of that, something that I've worked really hard on, is to really focus on mastering one goal or one thing at a time. Now, this has taken a while. I still sometimes get a little bit diverted, like at the moment, I'm really immersing myself in LinkedIn. And I remember seeing something, can't remember what it was about, but it was about something I want to know about. And I went to watch the video. In fact, I think I even pressed play. And then I stopped myself and I was like, what are you doing? I talked myself down a little bit. I thought, what are you doing? You're focusing on LinkedIn right now. Why are you flooding your brain with information about other things? That other thing can wait. And I've really found that by hyper focusing, my growth and my progress and my results, they all happen much, much faster. And I don't feel quite so overwhelmed and I don't feel quite as stressed. So, whether it's marketing, this podcast, sales, whatever it might be, I have learnt the hard way that by trying to do all of it to a high standard all the time, it spreads you thin and you end up either burning out or you just can't really do a good job for any of them. You know, for instance, when I launched this podcast, that was probably the first time I really, really focused on one thing. When I launched this, I didn't just squeeze it in between other tasks and other things I was launching. I mean, I was launching the Tutors Mastermind, but I staggered it. I did it after the podcast. So I made space for it and I gave it my full attention. As I shared recently in the Mastermind, the way I operate with making sure that I'm improving and learning with social media is every 3 months, I choose a different platform to focus on. And when I focus, that's when I hyper focus. So let's take, for example, Instagram. Instead of just focusing on Instagram as a whole, I hyper focus on one part of it. So maybe I want to hyper focus on really optimizing my stories or my grid or using video content, whatever it might be. And I'm kind of in competition with myself. My aim is just to get 1% better than the last time I focused on that platform. And what's been happening by me cycling through that is that everything not just gains momentum, but I find it easier to keep the momentum going because I'm getting faster, I'm getting better, I understand it more. And there's that compound effect through the year because I'm constantly aiming just to make that small improvement step by step. Whereas before, when I just put social media marketing in one category, in one box, or when I just tried to focus on a whole platform without really a focus, I didn't really get results very fast. I got results, but I didn't see any significant improvement. And of course, that's really demotivating when you're putting your energy into learning and taking action. And actually, just like the mastermind, as I'm usually part of a business membership, I am right now. And when I do focus on one thing, I just choose the training that's about that topic. So right now, I'm really focusing on LinkedIn. That's the only training I'm looking at. And that's actually why I join memberships, because I like to pick and choose what I'm looking at rather than following a curriculum. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, if things are feeling a little messy in your business or with how you work, just ask yourself this question. What's one thing, just one thing that I need to focus on right now? What's one thing that will get me a little bit closer, just that one step closer to my goal? Now, my third lesson is an oldie but a goodie. Consistency really is the key to growth. Like it or not, there's no avoiding it. Now, I know you've heard it before, but consistency, it just really is the magic ingredient with almost everything. And we know that. We're educators. We understand how learning happens, how results are achieved. So whether it's marketing, networking, or delivering value to your students, whatever it might be, when you show up regularly, you will make those continuous improvements and that continual progress. And it's much more effective than one-off grand gestures, so to speak. I remember when I started on social media with my tutoring business, it was about 1 year since leaving the classroom, or maybe slightly less, let's say 1 year. So it was 7 years ago. And what it looked like was me just posting really consistently on my Facebook page, just so that I was staying visible and I was staying front of mind. Now, I never really got masses and masses of engagement, but I did get loads and loads of inquiries, and I still do. I get inquiries through there from my historical content or maybe from my visibility. I don't really know, but it comes through there. In fact, something that made me feel a little bit better was I attended a webinar recently, and the person delivering was saying how 90% of people they asked, and they've got a pretty big audience, said that majority of their clients basically didn't even engage with their content. So people who were buying from them weren't engaging. And I've really had the same experience. You know, if you're a client listening, then chances are you don't actually engage very much with my content. The majority of my clients don't. And that's not me being critical or being upset about it. It's just a fact. You know, I don't know why. I don't know how it works. You know, I have about I don't know, 500 odd people listen to this podcast every week, but I don't have 500 reviews, so we often are listening, we're often watching, we may not be engaging, but we're paying attention. And I'm making a real point of this because this is why consistency with anything, marketing especially, is so important, because you may feel like you're not getting anywhere. You may feel like, who's even listening to this, or who's reading my content or watching my videos or whatever it might be. But they're watching. And the whole point of marketing is to stay front of mind, is to start conversations so that when the time is absolutely right, that person thinks of you. Now, of course, comes with that systems and processes and potentially delegation. We do need to have things in place to help make it sustainable. But whatever you do, remember that consistency is key. So even if you can't do something as frequently as you would like, it's better to do it not infrequently. It's better to do something once a week, but keep doing that for years, than to try and do it 3 times a week, but only be able to manage it for a month. So when you are being consistent, when you are tracking results, I'm just slipping this extra tip in. Do remember to track the right data. And when I say the right data, work backwards from your goal. You're kind of doing a bit of reverse engineering here. Think about what you want to achieve and what data signals that you're achieving that. Because if, say, for instance, you're using social media, I know I keep going back to that, but it's just got so many examples. Let's say you're using social media and your aim is actually to grow your audience. And, if you're then tracking how many likes you've got, that's not really a signal that you're growing your audience. You want to then track how many followers perhaps you have, the quality of your followers, and so on. So being consistent really isn't about perfection. It's about commitment. My 4th lesson learned is that it takes years to see overnight success style results. We've all heard of overnight successes, but spoiler alert, they don't really exist. What we see as an overnight success, usually there's many years of hard work that's gone behind it. Last year, for example, 7 years into my business, was the first year where all year round I had this influx of tutees coming to me. I wasn't advertising, it was coming through word of mouth. And also for Upgrade Your Education business, individual social media posts just made loads of sales. But that took 7 years. Before that, sales were coming through. I mean, many of you who might be listening may have come across this podcast on social media, or maybe you've been working with me and you met me through social media. So it's not that it wasn't happening, but it just felt a bit like it was being drip fed. It wasn't happening where, right, I'm going to post this one thing and I just know there's going to be an influx of inquiries or sales. Whereas last year, it felt like something had clicked and I didn't know what that was because I hadn't changed anything. I think it really boils back down to that consistency I was talking about. And something I've learned is to really recognize what works for you and to double down on it. So for me, social media marketing really, really works. Now, I totally value the importance of email marketing and I use it heavily. But, there have been months, last month, I think, I forgot to do my newsletter. I will forget to do stuff like that, or I won't prioritize it if I have other things to do. But I have never missed a week of social media marketing, never, because that is what gets me the business. That is what attracts clients to me. That's how I meet people. That's how I form relationships. It's really, really important to me and my business. And so that's what I double down on because it has proven results for me. So I did say that, it takes time, but the reality is that if you're not doing the right thing over time, then it may feel quite deflating because you may not quite see the results that you were hoping for. Now, honestly, you have to a point, trust the process. But if you feel you've been taking consistent action for a while, then it's time to invest. It's time to invest in some training. If you're already investing, it's time to really take focused action and to try and monitor, well, what part of this strategy is working and what part isn't. If you're someone who was like me for a long time in my business where you're relying on free material, then you're only going to get so far. And that's a fact because everyone, including me, I do share my best stuff on my podcast, but still, I'm not sharing everything. It wouldn't make sense for me to. It wouldn't be fair on my clients. So when you invest, the quality and how much you get will always be better. And honestly, I really did see such a transformation in my business when I started investing and learning from people who knew what they were talking about. And that's why I haven't stopped. I'm always paying for some form of business support. But here's the thing I really want you to take away from this. Give yourself grace. Remember that success is cumulative, and every tiny step you make builds momentum. You're never wasting your time. You may not see the payoff of what you're doing right now, but you will in a year's time. My fifth tip is bizarrely taken from an Instagram meme I saw. It said both fear and faith are invisible, so you choose. And why not choose faith? When you believe in yourself, others will. When you believe that your offers are the best, when you really believe in your business and you're proud of your business, it shows, it radiates. People believe it too. I might sound really bold or potentially even arrogant saying this, but I believe what I offer is the best in the tuition industry. I really do. Now, I'm not saying that because I think I'm better than my colleagues, but because I really believe in what I offer. I pour my heart and soul into it. And when you're passionate about it, it really does. It shows and it rubs off on other people. You know, they get confidence because you're confident. And I think that comes from a place of faith. Because when you have faith in what you're doing, when you really believe in what you're doing, when you're operating with integrity, the faith naturally is there and it supports you. And even if you haven't made any sales and you've just launched something new, when you really believe in it, you just know it's going to sell. You just feel it. And it's not tangible, it's invisible. But I'm just going to circle back to that meme. We have two choices. We can feel fear or we can have faith. And, you know, something I did recently was just in September, I launched the Upgrade Your Mindset book club. And I was a bit apprehensive. I thought, should I be taking on more work? But I really wanted to do it. So I did. I just launched it. And I knew it would sell. And it did sell. But I changed my mind. You know, I decided actually by December, I realized I don't have space for it. It's too much work right now. So I say I stopped it. But from January, I've paused it. So you can change your mind whenever you like. But have faith and give things a go. When I work with a lot of new business owners or people who are launching something new, some work I often do with them is I ask them, I want you to prepare for success. If right now you had an influx of clients, you had, 100 clients, are your systems, are your processes, can they cope? Can you cope? So we always prepare for success. And it's such a great way of approaching things because you're already kind of visualizing that thing working. So you feel positive, you feel confident. Now for my sixth lesson learned, and that is that simplicity wins over complexity. I have been tempted to overcomplicate my business so many times. In fact, I've done it and then I've had to reverse out of it. Overcomplicating does feel tempting, especially when you're not getting results you want. You feel like you're not doing enough. That must be why you're not getting the results. So you do more. Or sometimes you kind of get a bit bored and you feel a little bit like, oh, I need to try something new. But the reality is that sometimes it can overcomplicate things. And depending on what we're talking about complicating, it can cause some problems. When you're thinking about the offers that you sell, for example, when I first started Upgrade Your Education business, I was thinking, well, I've got my one-to-ones and I can do workshops and I can have the mastermind and I can do courses and I can have resources. And then I realized that if I do all of that, how am I even going to communicate what I offer? And I do have resources. I have 100 content prompts, for example. I've got the group class course. I've got a variety of things on the go, but I don't actually present them all. I don't talk about them all the time. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, for example, if you go to my website, I essentially always stick to 3 things. I've got my membership, I've got my one-to-ones, and the group class course. That's it. And I keep it simple. And it really makes communicating and selling so much easier. And it helps people understand what you offer. Otherwise, they get confused as well. And this is especially important. This concept of simplicity is especially important when you're launching your business or launching something new, because usually what you really need is probably 50% or less than what you think you need to get started. When I teach people how to launch their tutoring business, and this is in the mastermind as well as a kind of free included course, we start getting clients and making sales by module 2. Like the first module is literally just some fundamentals of what needs to happen or what needs to be in place, and then we start selling, and that's without any marketing. So we often overcomplicate processes, we overcomplicate marketing, we think we need everything because everyone's telling us we need everything. But actually, there's very little we often need because there's usually very little that's working really well. If you've heard of the 80-20 principle, in fact, if you were in the book club and you read the 4-hour week with me, you will have heard of the 80-20 principle. And that principle essentially says that 80% of your results is coming from 20% of your effort. And when I sat down and I actually analysed, I was like, wow, this is like magic. That's true. It's really true. And it released so much pressure and it released so much time because I just simplified. I let go of things. And actually, I simplify periodically. I won't say every few months or whatever because I just know when it's time. I know when things may have built up, when I need to relook at my calendar and how I'm working, and I just know when I need it. But I do it periodically. And over the years, over 8 years, I've developed systems that are really efficient. I've delegated and I've got a way of delegating that's really fast and easy and clear. I've got systems in place to keep me really active on multiple social media platforms, having this podcast on the go, all sorts of things. And I just layered one thing on top of each other. I kept making those small improvements. And I guarantee me talking to you this time next year, I will have made more improvements because I'm always just trying to refine. So keep focusing on making those 1% improvements. I've tried the alternatives. I've tried making the kind of big goals, and they're just not sustainable. They really are not. Whereas 1% improvements is really sustainable and you get the result. You get the result you were after. And when you keep things simple, it reduces stress, it saves you time, and it makes things easier to sell. Now for number 7. Boundaries are really important. Make sure you protect your mental health as well as your business. Now, without firm and clear boundaries, burnout isn't just likely, it's pretty much inevitable. Setting really clear boundaries has been a game changer for me. For instance, I could very easily work around the clock. I know I could. If it's, 11 o'clock at night, and if I grabbed my laptop, I'd be working till 4 a.m, and I'd be really engrossed. But it really affects your health. And I'm getting older. I'm 42, which I know isn't old. But I used to be able to pull all-nighters and be fine the next day. And I'm just not now. I'm very jaded. It affects my mood. I can't shake the exhaustion. So I have to have boundaries to protect my health and also my mental health. I was talking to a client who is working all the time. And I had to warn her that you've got to make space to have space. Because actually you get the really, really good ideas when you have a bit of headspace. For instance, I'll tell you something that happened that was really, really obvious. In the Tutors Mastermind, at the end of each month, I go live and I deliver some bonus training and I ask people for questions. I do questions and answers. And although people turn up and they stay from start to finish and they love it, they don't ask questions. And so I just kind of choose things that I think they'd find really useful. And I've just been operating like this. And this, last year in particular was really hard and didn't have much headspace. But when I took some space, when I actually decided to stop the book club, just that knowledge alone helped me relax. I suddenly thought, hang on a second, every Monday and every Friday, we have a thread in the mastermind group where we set goals and then we review our wins. We talk about our challenges. And inside there is already a thread of people asking questions. So I thought, why don't I just gather those and talk about those? And when I mentioned it to the masterminders, they were like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense because you always ask, do you have any questions? And then I can never think of any, but I've already actually put them down in that thread. Now it's so obvious, isn't it? When I tell you it like this, it's so obvious. But because I didn't have the headspace, I didn't have time to reflect or come up with that idea, to have that light bulb moment. So you really can't undervalue the value of taking time out, of making space. And you can only do that with boundaries. And boundaries, they relate to so many different things. I've disconnected with people where, I've just found them a bit triggering, or they haven't been behaving all that nicely. There's no need for it. I don't need to have that in my network. So remember, boundaries, they don't just protect you. They protect your business, your reputation at times, and ultimately you can't deliver your best work if you're running on empty. Now for my 8th lesson learned, and that is you have to have your own measure of success. I've recalled this conversation in a couple of podcast episodes, but I'll do it one more time. I remember speaking to a one-to-one client, and she was really, really, really down. She'd been working so hard on her business, and she still wasn't making the kind of sales she wanted. And she was just like, I'm failing. I'm not doing well. And I suddenly remembered the first conversation we had in our discovery call. And I just paused and I asked her, remind me, why did you actually set up your business? And she said, well, because I've got 2 really young children and I want to be able to spend time with them. I want to see them grow up. And so I said, so are you? And she said, yeah. And I was like, so you are being successful? Because when I asked you, why did you set up the business and what are your goals? Money didn't even come into it. Now, the reality is we all need money. We all need money to live. We need to pay our bills. But money doesn't tend to be part of our definitions of success when we really think about it. So success looks different to all of us. And the sooner we define it, the happier we'll be, because you've got something that you're measuring that makes you happy. You're not comparing yourself with other people. You're not feeling pressurized by people saying, I'll show you how to make, however much money. And you feeling like, oh, well, maybe I should be making that much money. You don't get confused with other things. There's a lot of noise. And so being clear on what success means to you is a great way of just keeping that focus and staying really grounded. Over the years, my measure of success has evolved. My measure of success right now is to be able to work 3 to 4 days a week. I mean, I only teach 3 now. I like to have time to dedicate to my musical hobbies. I want to be able to go on holiday during term time. In fact, that was one of my very first definitions of success from year 1. And every year I've gone away during term time. I've never gone away during the school holidays since I left teaching. Well, no, that's a lie. I have, but I've also been away during term time. Just on principle, just because I can. It reminds me of how pleased I am that I left the classroom. My definition of success is having a stable income. That makes me feel safe. And having space to give back to the community. This podcast, it is a business tool. I do get a lot of clients through it. But I'm also aware that there are people listening and who will listen who will never become my client. And that's okay. I had a lot of help setting up my business and learning. People who don't even know that they helped me. It may have been through a Facebook thread, for example, and I might have spotted some comments that I thought, oh, that's a good idea. It takes a village. And this is my way of also giving back. And that's part of my definition of success, to always be able to do at least one thing where I'm giving back to the community that supported me so much. And of course, I want to build a business, or I have built a business I'm really proud of. Now, when you're thinking about your definition of success, it's very different from having goals. A goal I tend to class as something that's really tangible. So right now, my goal is I want to double how many masterminders I have. And I always have a why behind that goal. I want to double that. I want to make double the money. But that's because I actually have ideas where I want to reinvest that money into the mastermind. So that's really tangible. That's a goal, but it's not my definition of success. If I haven't met that goal, I wouldn't say I was unsuccessful. I think I'm successful right now. So take a moment just to ask yourself, what does success look like to me? More free time? Is it a higher income? Is it having 100 students, although I would class that more as a goal? Define it, chase it, and ignore everyone else's versions. So there you have my kind of celebration of 8 years of being out of the classroom. I really tried to think of things that went beyond the obvious. I tried to think of things that have had significant impact and continues to have significant impact. And, it's January, it's the time of new starts. And I stopped making New Year's resolutions a long time ago. Instead, what I quite like to do at the end of each year is to think about what I'm just going to continue. What do I want to take into the next year? And these are the things I want to continue. These are the things that have really benefited me. And I'm sure this time next year, I'll be sharing 9 lessons learned. I have to stop somewhere, don't I? Because I don't know, like, will I ever reach 30 lessons learned? Who knows? But yes, this time next year, let's see where I'm at and what else I've learned. As always, thank you, though, for staying with me. Thank you for giving me your time. And if you have a quick moment, I'd love a review. It helps me reach more people. And you'll hear from me on Wednesday. Would you like to take this discussion further? Perhaps you have some questions or you'd like more ideas on tailoring your business. If so, book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes.